Hello, 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 and welcome back to yet another episode 257 of Electricpreneur Secrets, the Electricians podcast. We are the Electricpreneurs, just a couple of master electricians with business addictions here and ready to serve as we do 5 days a week, helping you master your sales, simplify your pricing, and deliver premium level electrical service. I am Clay Newmeyer. This is my esteemed co-host, Joseph Lucani, and welcome to our freemium daily coach call, where the cost for admission for you, sit back, listen to everything we have to say, take action on this stuff, and share your wins back with us so we know that it's working. Joe, how are you doing today, my brother?
Man, I'm feeling great. Ever had one of those days where you just wake up and you just feel like the sun just happened to shine on you?
Yeah.
It's a weird moment because as a dad, that doesn't often happen. Usually it's waking up to the sound of crying or someone woke up earlier than they needed to. But today I woke up feeling really, really, really good, which is not common. So I'm just going to say it's a great day to have a great day.
Well, I love that, man. I'm feeling it
Right here.
too.
How you holding up?
Yeah, great energy, brother. The whole week's shaping up. I love this. We're midweek and we've got a great podcast. And this one actually is all about, if you can measure it, you can manage it, tying back into our sales sanity and making sure that we in this $1 million launch are able to consistently keep going towards the finish line. We've been working hard. We've laid out our entire plan. We've shared Dan's story in this one and how that's related closely to exactly what we're doing, the exact steps we're taking, and everything's really coming together. I know we could have spent a ton of time on maintenance agreements, diving much deeper on filling the voids, and there's a ton more to it. But in our discussion, I mean, there's weeks of training around that stuff. So we kind of just got to move on. This is the best we can do in this podcast series. And I think we would be making a mistake if we didn't talk about some of the measurement and management principles, some KPI, how to leverage this stuff, how to make that information then turn into data sets and knowledge that we can take action on. Would that make sense to you?
I agree with that completely because at the same time, any marksman needs to know they need to find the target before you can fire at it. And there's a lot of times where people can often feel in paralysis, where you want to do the right things. You feel like you want to move your company forward, but you're not able to place your direction. And as a result, you end up just waddling and spinning in nowhere.
Definitely, man. Definitely. So there's a few areas we could really go with this. And I think my original idea was even a bit different than what I'm thinking now, because we've got a few positions working for us. And I think we have an opportunity to touch on each of them a little bit and some of the levers we might have. So even right at the front end with our CSR, what are some of the ways that we can really kind of measure their performance and make sure that we're able to consistently deliver? And maybe it's even in part the burning basic action from yesterday with making sure we're having, 10 potential customer conversations every day. But what are your thoughts around that? Are there some areas that we can kind of leverage and measure with that CSR position?
Yeah. So it depends on what your CSR is technically doing, because sometimes people will have their CSR be the office manager and they combine dispatch with CSR work.
Yeah.
But if they're strictly a customer service representative, they're managing phones, then you would manage the output and the inputs of what they're doing in their position. What I mean by that is we know there's a certain amount of calls coming in. Those calls, we know percentage of them are going to be duds. They're calling because they think you're the utility company. They're asking you to fix their lamp. Like, okay, those aren't the right fits.
Yeah.
But let's say 80% are. So of that 80%, how many calls were taken and how many calls were converted?
Love it.
That
So
would
call
be their
booking rate.
conversion ratio. Yeah. Booking rate would be there.
Absolutely.
Secondly, is that during our process, we offer our first class pass. So then your next metric would be, are you offering it to every customer? Because even though it's on the script, you'd be surprised how some people don't mention it because they're worried that it might make them seem pushy. But it's not. It's just a way of qualifying who wants different levels of service.
Yeah.
So one, did you offer to everyone? Then the second metric was how many people would take it. That's a smaller metric. Usually you only expect anywhere from 5 to 15% to take your top options. So maybe as much as 30% take your first class pass. If you, for some reason, exceed 30%, that's really important information to know. Because if too many people take the first class pass, no one is first class anymore.
Right.
And as a result, you could have an influx of customers all at once that are trying to get that same treatment when you're not staffed properly to do so.
I love that you brought up the overselling it too.
Yeah, well, it's a possibility,
Yeah.
because if you think about it, it's something that appeals to everyone. I want my priority service. I want my after hour service, the diagnostics wave, like all those things. Every customer could say, yeah, I'd want that.
Mm-hmm.
So provided that their justification is you can get out today, yeah, here you go. I got to prevent too many people from taking it.
Yeah.
So I'm monitoring, are we not selling enough of them? Are we selling too many of them? And we adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Love that. Love that, man. Really good stuff with the
Additionally,
CSR.
awesome. Additionally, we want to talk about your outbound happy calls. So it's okay, how many existing customers have you contacted today? You would set a metric for it and say, like, how you mentioned 10 incoming calls?
Yep.
Well, what if you set a percentage of how many calls you're going to make outbound?
Mm-hmm.
If you have 1,000 customers and you only did one a day, you still couldn't get to everyone in a year. You'd be there 3 years later.
Best to be
But if you
proactive on that.
Exactly. So if you said that your KPI is, I'm going to make 3 outbound happy calls per day, you could theoretically take care of 1,000 customers in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But provided you did that, it would be A, did I do my outbounds? B, what was the conversion ratio of accepted people who want new work? So if you make a happy call, you're not trying to sell them anything additional. But while you're talking to them, if they mention something that could be of value to them, you should be able to be measured and bonused by, can you get the text foot back in the door?
100%. One of my favorites on our front end even is, hey, if they're also doing some of your organic marketing for you, if that person, if your CSR does a post or engages, causes someone to come in, book an appointment with you, and realizes the sale, isn't that worth a bit of a home run bonus right there?
I think it would be, because theoretically, that's just free money. You had a customer who didn't currently buy that you got your foot back into, and now they're able to move forward with a higher tier sale because of that person's efforts. Why wouldn't you want to pay them?
Love it, man. Love it. So really good expression, getting the wheels turning. Now, let's say just for a moment, we'll just touch on this. Let's say call booking rate is actually a bit lower than what we're looking for. Maybe they're shooting a dismal 30% for a couple of weeks. What are some of, just quickly, Joe, some of the areas we might look to see what's going on here? How would we leverage our information and begin to make a decision on what to improve?
So the first thing is that we would, want to monitor the call. So what we like to do is we would use an app called Ring Central. Granted, any kind of monitoring software you use is totally fine. But the benefit of using a recording software is you can unobjectively look at it, either with them or without them. The reason why I say go into recording software first is, let's say I were to come to you, Clay, and you're our CSR, and I say, hey, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to sit right next to you, and I'm going to listen to you take your calls, and I'm going to be taking notes the entire time. Do you think that might affect performance even a little bit?
Absolutely. Even if I'm a clutch player, I'm going to be showing off to an extent. There's a bias here. I'm not going to miss anything. It's just not a real scenario. It's not going to be the consistent average.
Exactly. So if you were to say, okay, I'm going to use random numbers. Let's say you had those 10 calls a day. Okay. How many of those calls are you randomly selecting for inspection? So you, the manager, or you, the customer service manager, or the operations manager, some position that you have requires you to now go and upkeep your staff, which is, okay, which calls are they succeeding with? Which calls are they not? Is it a particular type of call? Is it a specific demand scenario? Is it a time frame issue? What do we need to improve on?
Yeah.
After you've gone through and said, what do we as a company need to improve on? Then you can focus on the person themselves. Because I'm not one to throw rocks at a glass house. Because if they say, hey, the reason it's not going is because we don't have the availability, that doesn't sound like the CSR can suddenly drum up text out of thin air.
Yeah.
So I can do better.
Love it, man. We're going to leave the CSR there because there's so much more to cover here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's now move to the person taking or running that play, then the call, the sale, the sales tech. In this case, in our $1 million launch, that could be you or I. Now, how would we begin to evaluate our performance in that sales process, brother?
I love that you're asking this, because we have it's like, I think you know the answer to this one, but realistically, it's because we have something known as a post-call fact sheet. What that means is that our process has been broken down into bullet points of the major individual levers. And we're checking off after the sale or after the interaction, which of these levers did we activate? And what we'll find is that provided they're consistently filling it out, which should be required in our KPI, we then could sit down and have them turned into our service manager with yourself or me or whoever that is. That person can then see, because it's a systemized approach, we can see where in the call it's falling apart. Is it post price? Is it pre price? Is it at arrival? Is it when you're investigating the competition? Where does the fall apart happen?
Yep.
Once you recognize where the gap is, you can shore up and strengthen the defenses around it. That could be role playing exercises, that could be additional training, that could be scenario breakthroughs. Whatever it is, we need to figure out where the problem is. And without the post call facts, it's only done off intuition.
Yeah.
And intuition's not a good measure.
Yeah, I love that. And for this role, there's really kind of two levels, right? Because that post-call facts is like the zoomed in, the process fulfillment, this little check sheet that they can do each time. But then there's also the zoomed out, is there a need for concern here? Calls ran, calls sold, gives us a conversion rate, right? But also, what type of call was it? That's something that many companies are not tracking. In our KPI workbooks we do, was it a demand call? Was it an opportunity call? Was it an inspection or maintenance call, right? That's kind of important information. Obviously, having, your trip charge built in, a diagnostic call, there's a higher percentage of conversion just based on the lever that is there in saving people time and effort and sacrifice. And all I mean by that is if you're there to fix something and you give options that fix the thing, what are the chances they're going to want to start over from zero and wait for another tech?
You'd have to be pretty significantly either higher than what they expected, but even then, it's not always price. It's do I trust this person? Do I believe what they're telling me? And do I have faith that this is the right fit to solve the problem?
Totally.
If you can check those three boxes, which our process is meant to do, because we established that we're showing up as tens, because it's been built into our CSR and tech process, then you should be the one who moves forward with it.
100%.
But I'd rather have this person know that we're at least monitoring it. We're at least trying to find gaps for our own improvement so that we can improve how we serve them.
Of course. Whereas if we were going running opportunity calls, and let's say one of us does actually, maybe we split that up and I'm doing demands and you're doing opportunities. The opportunity call is likely to have a lower conversion rate just based on the fact that it's a higher percentage of people collecting multiple estimates because they're not looking to get it done today.
Correct. And there's no shame in someone not wanting to do it today. A lot of times, the biggest concern that contractors face is, oh, they're just getting estimates. But okay, focus on why they're trying to get estimates. What are they looking to provide from someone else that you haven't already offered? Why do they feel the need to keep looking for other people? What if you could only offer them a solution and feel like you can ethically question them on it? If you can do that and you feel like you're not being pushy, then you're more likely to create the relationship required to succeed on the opportunity call.
Definitely, man. And so I'm going to zoom us back out and say, okay, demand calls ran, number of demand calls sold, number of opportunity calls ran, number of opportunity calls sold, demand call average ticket, average options sold, checking which options were sold. Once you have all this information for each of the type of calls, you can see pretty quickly, and a spreadsheet does a wonderful job of representing this data in a single dashboard. And that's what our KPI workbook does, to show you exactly where you ought to focus. For example, high conversion, low average ticket, and a bunch of basic options. Well, where would you focus? Maybe we ought to take another look at our 6 options, our spread between them, make sure that there's consistent gaps, make sure that the stuff we're offering is actually speaking to the observation section and what we're presenting. And that's kind of where that post-call facts can tie in, and we can hyper focus on some really strong improvements just from having that information. And that's learning. I love this redefinition. If I can just throw this in here for a minute.
Sure.
Hormozy said this, and it really stuck with me. Learning is not the text and the information you extract or the audio that you extract and hold in our minds. Learning is the behavioral difference given the same situation. which
That is
implies
fire.
we've got to take action, right?
Mhm.
Like in other words, knowledge isn't power. The use of it is. So without the activity, right? The last thing I wanted to touch on, Joe, here, if we could, I think there's still a bit of a veil around installer metrics potentially.
Mm.
And
Okay.
since we brought on an installer, how would we begin to measure some of their performance and be able to have some levers there to help them stay in tune and values and get these jobs done in reasonable time and get those
Mhm.
payments coming in so we can keep on growing this business?
So there's really two different metrics that you would look at. One is the physical, and the second is the relationship.
Hmm.
So the physical is relatively straightforward. Did you perform above or below the specified amount of hours that we had allotted for this project? Did you do it above and below the material allotment for this project? Like that stuff is pretty straightforward, right? Okay, you took an
Mhm.
extra day. That's a problem. You finished in half a day. Great. All right, wonderful. Physical, I don't think we need to get into too much. The relationship, on the other hand, has a lot that goes into it. So I would say, as a very first metric, how many reviews are you consistently getting at the end of the process? The reason why I stress that is because if you follow our process, you're supposed to be getting a review after every interaction. And additionally, if you're using the wording the right way, almost every customer is going to say, yeah, of course we'll write you a review. But when you have it in your hand available for them, the odds of them not doing it right there is pretty low. So I would want to say, okay, at least 60% you should be getting reviews on your jobs. If you're getting above 60%, that's great. Let's figure out by how much and what are you doing differently. Maybe we can change the process to incorporate it. If you're getting under 60%, the odds are you're not doing it wrong. The odds are you're just not doing it.
Hmm.
That's the first lever. Additionally, I would say what options were upgraded while you were on site. We have an install upgrade process because our salesperson reviewed every option with your installer prior to them leaving the shop. So when they presented the install upgrade, there was a strong reason why the customer could do it. So you'd want to say, what kind of reviews did you get? What kind of upgrades did you get? Additionally, they're doing the good neighbor policy. So if they're doing the good neighbor policy, how many reviews did they gather versus how many doors did you knock on? So maybe you finished a half day early and you're knocking on the entire neighborhood. You hit 50 doors. Okay, well, how many people came from that? We don't know, but I know you did 50 doors. Maybe you only did three and one person answered. That's still huge. So all these metrics focus back on what can you do to strengthen the relationship and the presence in this area. Things
And that was
like,
fire.
thank you so much. I
I
was
hate
just
to
saying,
cut you
what?
off. I could see you
No.
could keep going. That was
Yeah,
fire.
you know me. You know me.
There's some really good stuff in there, and I think we made it obvious enough on the installer. Of course, we always got to mind the time here. I
Okay.
want to just point out how this now comes full circle back to the office, an office
Mhm.
manager, and the follow-up calls and that follow-up care. And then if we're not getting the reviews on site, how many are we then getting back on the board from the office, from the CRM? There's so
Mhm.
much in this full loop, just like our loop method, and everything we're trying to do again in service loop is that little bit extra for future serviceability. And doesn't that tie right back into yesterday's episode, filling the voids, cashing checks, and building a team on a values base that is so important and so critical to industries everywhere to continue being able to actually have a service experience as a homeowner, have a service experience that actually
Mhm.
serves you in your life and your growth, your relationships, in your community. I mean, God, this stuff's important.
I agree with you 100%.
Basic action. Can I take it?
By all means.
Because I've got some alliteration here. The basic action today is the bottleneck. It's the recognition of the bottleneck. Ask yourself this in this $1 million launch, wherever you're at in your business, if you're following along, where is my bottleneck? Where is it? And it can't be intuition that shows you where the bottleneck is. You can't just close your eyes and meditate on it and go, I know where it is, it's here. What data do you have that's telling you where the bottleneck is? And you might actually see several, but notice the order we went in today. If your call booking rate's a dismal 21%, does it make sense to go to the sales guy and crank some training up? Or does it make sense to go back to where the call comes in or where the call is made and start training and refining that process and finding the lever you need to move the bottleneck to the next place? Find your bottleneck. That's the basic, brother. Do you have an all-star for us?
You know, I don't top of mind, but I'm very certain that we can work through it. Because when we're talking about trying to come up with removing the bottleneck, my next thing is going into, are you trained enough to teach someone else something? What I mean by that is, you're the service manager, you're the operations manager, you're the person who's overseeing this. So you're listening to how the CSR was taking their calls. But how could you do it if you yourself didn't know how to do their job? You wouldn't be a fair person. You'd be holding and comparing by script notes, and that's not going to work. So the all-star action is, before you feel comfortable training someone, you should at the very least understand what their job requires and what the right way is supposed to sound like. That way you'll have a sharper ear to notice where the gaps are, and you'll also be someone who's approaching as a peer rather than just as a supervisor.
I love it, man. I think that ability to demonstrate that is huge in leadership, right? You can't push a string across the table and expect it to stay in a straight line, but you sure can pull one. That's going to tie us perfectly into the next episode, which I think is due to go into some training schedules, how we're going to train, what we're going to do in that, Joe. But this has been another episode, a fantastic episode of Electricpreneur Secrets. I would really advise you go back again and listen to the Electricians podcast today, because this one was huge on our mission to help you guys master sales, simplify pricing, and deliver premium level electrical service in this $1 million launch. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Look forward to seeing you guys. Be well.